Welcome back, or welcome to the Next Level Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Harris. And as always, we are brought to you by Apex Performance, the only leadership and performance development training program in the security industry for security professionals by security professionals. And I am ecstatic to finally get on the podcast today, the one and only Brittany Galli. Welcome, Brittany. I appreciate you taking the time to participate. And any introduction that I could give won't do you service, but I'll try to give a little bit. So, you and I have known each other for a long time. We met actually here in Minneapolis, I think in 2019 at the first Accelerize event. You ran up, gave me a big hug, and said, "I've been waiting to meet you." And I was like blown away by your energy and just the excitement that you brought into both that room and then the conversation. We created GSD, or Get Security Done, created that with a bunch of other friends that we were a part of, with Tim and Mary and Lisa and Matt and Lee and on and on. And then you've gone on to just become a voice and an energy in the industry, as part of Women in Security and other awesome things that you're doing. But what folks don't know also is you're a technologist. You understand the innovation on the technology side. I think sometimes, unless people know you well, they don't know that other innovative side of you. And I look forward to highlighting that today. But welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, John. I think that was like the better than my intros for myself. So might use that later, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll send you that clip.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
so I always like to ask when we have people on, nobody's story is the same of how we get into the industry, and few times do people say, yeah, this was like by design. I wanted to do this. So tell our listeners a little bit about how you got into the industry, what that on-ramp was like, and kind of the early years of exploring and getting used to life in the security industry.
Yeah, I'm not certain I know very many people that have gotten into security world on purpose, right? I think a lot of us fell into it, and then we ended up navigating our little niche positions inside of it. You and I had a kind of a similar route in the consulting world to begin with. I started actually in finance and operations, and then worked in the startup tech space and security world. Did a SaaS product, and that sold off the company, and now working with the C-suite to basically just advisory and looking across that 360 view of how CSOs are either meeting regulatory, cyber, and physical security access control requirements, or we're identifying the gaps and helping them fill those gaps with vendors or processes or project management, whatever that is. That's kind of my space now. But again, that is a 10 to 12-year road of lots of learning lessons and meeting lots of people. And inside of that, I think, my passion lies too inside of the women in security space, because there are so few of us. And that's kind of where I was, new to the industry, just like many of us are. And I said, I need to know people, and I need to know people fast. And where can I go? And, women in security grabbed me, and, it blossomed. It was blossoming, I will say, the minute that I got there. Lisa Nolan, Donna Kobzarek, Loy Manning, those ones really, I'll say, were my mentors in the early years. And what they did was they said they pulled you into leadership. And that's still the case, I think, in women in security world, is we are still pulling people into leadership. And that's the beauty of it. And I think one of the takeaways from, my last 2 years as chair of women in security for ASIS is that, we see it globally now, and every country is really in a different spot. The Middle East is in one spot versus Latin America versus USA versus Australia versus Europe. And the lens on that, I think, is really interesting, and serves its own problems, but also some of the takeaways, and I'll say some of the wins of some of these women in these countries in the security space are incredible. And I'll give justice to South Africa. The South African Women in Security group is one of the strongest I've seen across the board. And it's just because they plug away at it every single day, and they don't take no for an answer. And I think that grit and that grind is true to the entrepreneurial spirit that I have. And I think, John, you have that too, right? It's in us no matter whether we live it or not. We can't stop But that's kind of the thing is, innovation started with, this group of GSD that we had, a few years back. And it was really that. It was like, if you're gonna talk about it, get stuff done in this industry, because otherwise we're gonna be 10 years forward and we're gonna be in the same spot, right? And that's kind of what I feel right now for some of these places is that, again, you don't have an option now to look down and ignore innovation. AI will surpass you, or companies with AI will surpass you. And it's, really like the industrial revolution in that way. Again, is like you adopt or die, right? But also, it's the speed and governance in which you put in place which will make it an elegant transition or a non-elegant transition, is my thought.
Oh, that fantastic. And a lot in there that I want to dive into. Let's start with um the women in security piece. You've always been a very strong advocate for voices of underrepresented persons in the security industry, young professionals, emerging leaders, and women as well. And that's a tough place to be at times. And we've had, I'm really excited to be highlighting on the show um over the next couple episodes some rock stars like Mary Gamble, yourself, Kekashan will be on the show. I've had some great women that have been, Aaron Mann, others who've been on the show who show up in those lists when those lists come out of the Power 100 or
Yep.
influential individuals. You mentioned though, like your example of the women in security group in South Africa, right? Like sometimes it's just you got to lean in and stop asking permission. And I think that was one thing that I really learned from you when we were first putting GSD together, which was created out of a frustration at the time with other organizations' lack of moving forward and waiting too long to take action. And so, that's something that I always felt had been a core competency and characteristic to you. And even when you pushed people outside of their comfort zone, where it was like, we'll let you in the door, but once you get in here, you got to follow the rules. Well, my experience is that you don't you refuse to bend to the will of others in a good way. Um, where does that come from? And how do you think it's served you in all these different roles, right? But specifically as you've blazed a trail through I think elevating through your time at Women in Security, kind of taking that to a newer level of capability and kind of global impact.
Yeah. No, good questions. And I think, women in security is a perfect example of that. I think too is, you have to be confident. And one of the things we're building and trying to build inside of women in security, but honestly, young professionals as well, is that everybody gets a voice, and everybody should get a voice. And the way you poise yourself with that voice, and the way you interact, and the way you sit at that boardroom table, and whether you're listening or you're talking, your job there is to build respect and knowledge and be a good listener, right? And building that confidence as an executive or a professional is really where it all starts. And I think what I've tried to do in the past, 10 years really is push and pull women in security into those positions so they get a boardroom seat table, right? Is step one. And then two, once you get there, how do you act? And that's the thing is that, a lot of companies, people, groups, associations, whatever they are, really do love it when you're there, you're a paying person or you're working, and then you're just quiet, right? But that doesn't bring any innovation, and that doesn't bring any diverse thought, and that doesn't bring new ideas to the table in again 2024 when we need to move swiftly and quickly, right? That doesn't do that. Now, I think the biggest learning lesson there is how do you do it in an elegant way with good delivery, right? But at the end of the day, there's just going to be some people out there that are going to say, you know what, you just need to be quiet. And I think that's, those are, but see, that's the perfect example of that is those aren't good leaders, right? No, I've had excellent leaders. I have, excellent mentors. I've had some, mediocre ones and some not so good ones. And I can say that the best leaders that I've had have been able to harness and channel talent, any type of talent, into a position where they felt empowered, confident, and they want to learn more about their job and their team. And those are the leaders that we should be after. Those are the ones we should be accepting. Those are the ones that we should be working for and nurturing. And there is a science to managing up. And I learned that early on. Actually, my mom taught me way back when she was in corporate America. And she said, there is literally an art to it. Managing above you is the biggest thing you can do as a young person from 18 on, and knowing, look, you better be lucky that you get a seat at that table and you listen for the first year and a half, right? But the minute that you have an idea and you have a good delivery of it, you need to deliver it, right? And I think building that kind of confidence circle inside of all of us is where we create kind of, or I should say, break down the boundaries of this very hierarchical political, you know, biases that we get inside of. And women insecurity, like I've heard from many women insecurity too, is some of women insecurity's biggest problem is women, believe it or not, right? They're bullying or they're pushing down or they don't want another woman sitting at the table next to them because it's competition or so on and so forth. And so that's the other barrier you kind of have to break down is like, look, we're all on the same team here. By the way, we're trying to get more of us in here. You know, how do we do that? Well, you create a very welcoming community and atmosphere where people feel welcome that they can always join and have a voice. And then helping them deliver that voice is really where the science begins. That's my thought.
Uh, Great points there, and I think you mentioned, and I think it's a microcosm of what I tend to see across the security industry. And again, I mentioned very often that I my assumption is this shows up in other industries as well. When I worked in
Yep.
aerospace and defense, it was like that in certain places too. Uh, there tends to be this, I went through it, so you have to go through it. I paid my dues, so you need
Right.
to, pay your dues versus and this, I mean, I talked to the Sierra Rise steering committee on Tuesday of this week. So we're recording this on Friday. We talked on Tuesday. And it was leadership and development training for them. And one of the things that I talked about with them, and you said it too, 10 plus years, 10, 12, 15, I've been in the industry for almost 20 years now. um I don't want it to take the 22, 23-year-old, 25, 7-year-old right now. I don't want it to take 10 years for them. I want it to
Right.
take 2, because the
Right.
industry can't afford
Right.
to wait 20 years for the next great leaders. We need them now.
Right.
And so I see it as our obligation, and I think you'd agree with me, to shorten, like, pass along the gift to them. Like, if I can empower you and educate you and help you. I mean, that's why I started Apex. That's why I started this podcast. I want to give people actionable knowledge and frameworks so that they can take it and say, hey, it took me 10 years and a lot of heartache and a lot of bumps in the road and a lot of failing to figure this out. I'm going to give it to you, so hopefully you can do it in a year or two. And you got to do the work though, right? Then
Yep.
that's the key, right? It's not that you know if I gave you a map and told you where the gold was, but it was 10 miles, you still got to walk those fucking 10 miles, right? And I
Right.
think that's the
100%.
critical piece, is that we're going to give you the roadmap, but you still have to take it. And so, two things there around the obligation for us to lift people up and not push them down. And when you get lifted up, you still got to pull too, right? It's like
Right.
if someone was hanging off the cliff and I'm holding them and they're just dangling and
Right.
not pulling themselves up too, like, that's going to be a lot harder.
But and I actually submitted a GSX proposal for this with Maria Dominguez. I don't know if you know her. She's an amazing mentor of mine as well. But she and we spoke on 5 years ago about the 5 generations of
Mm,
leaders inside the security industry. And this year we want to speak on that plus AI.
mm.
So how do you deal with a human team of 4 different generations, 5 different generations, and then add AI on top of that and still make them feel empowered, confident, and productive, right? To get the best out of them. And I think that to your point, we can't wait 10 years for them to get experience. We need to give them the roadmap and say, learn this in 2 years. But yeah, you have to still grind through it. But experience doesn't mean time anymore in my world. And what it means is you've had an opportunity to have an experience to learn, but how quickly you learn from that experience and what you learn from that experience is experience. You don't need to be in the industry 25 years anymore to learn every single thing about it. You now need to know, hey, I need to go up this ladder. This is the ladder that I want to climb. I think some of this industry struggled initially with what are even the learning paths, right? What are the critical paths through this industry? Okay, one's executive protection, one's sec tech, one's guarding, one's access control, so on and so forth. And it's a huge industry full of lots of money, lots of toys, lots of companies, and lots of people. And I think even now that we've settled kind of on some of those verticals, that was a big step. Is that now we can say, okay, we've got placement. How do we place these people, and where's their best skill set? Okay, what we're finding, for instance, as an example in operations and women in security world, is we're trying to get as many people in the C-suite as possible. And I made a promise to myself and this great group of women that I'm working with now of like, we're not stopping until there's 50% of females at the boardroom table. Now, well, honestly, we're not stopping globally. There needs to be 50% of females sitting at the boardroom table. And we're not done till that. You know why? Because then at least it's a diverse thought. And by the way, you know what? Everybody's got a chance. And lots of other industries have that. Financial services has that. Real estate world has that, right? We just don't yet. So I'm done when we're there. But at the same time, if we don't, I'll say, cradle some of these existing people into these leadership positions, we'll never get there. And that's kind of my ask to all the CSOs out there of like, look, it's now time that assume you're not going to get women in security to apply. Go find them and go find them quickly, because we're losing them as they're leaving with these layoffs and with these operational roles leaving. I hate to say it, but AI and all the processing will leave some of this, administrative stuff that's leaving as well. Well, one of the success stories with General Mills I just spoke about and heard through was that they're getting a lot of great security talent from project managers outside of security. So they're reeling in talent from that space, which is working very well from them. They have a completely 50% women to men security team they're at their executive level. And so that was why we asked them, how'd you do it? And they said, well, we just hired from the outside, trained them up on security in 6 months, and here we are.
I love that. And like, so well, I mean, we're both mutual friends with Keikishan, who will be on the podcast later this month. She's a great story. Like, I can't wait to share her story. If you've read the Kindness Games book, she's in there. She came in from PMO. Like she was, so it's a great, I mean, when I was a security manager, I used to hire, I would not hire a lot of security professionals. I would hire service professionals.
Right.
People who had worked in the service industry, because I thought it was a lot easier for me to teach you security at a basic level than people skills. Like that was going to be way harder for me to teach you how to deal, how to have peace under stress, how to deal with challenging situations. And if you've done that already, and service professionals tend to deal with that all the time, that was a lot easier to do. So you brought up AI. I love what you and Maria, if that presentation doesn't get accepted, come back on here. We'll have the conversation here, because I think it's a conversation needs to be had around how you infuse technology as almost another generation of operations.
It is.
So let's talk a little bit about that, about how, one, like, you understand you were kind of with the startup, an early innovator and an early adopter of technology. How are you projecting, give us a little bit of maybe a foreshadowing of what that presentation talks about around how you get people comfortable with the concept of embracing innovation, AI, technology in general, and how that and what role that'll play in the future of security.
Yeah, and it was interesting too, because like when I came into the industry from fintech was pretty far ahead, and that was like, coming into security was like, whoa, we don't know what a mobile app is, and that was kind of strange to me. So it was really a lot of the adoption that I went through was educating CSOs and company owners and lots of companies that says like, look, you're going to get there. It's how fast you get there. and how quickly you adopt these new things that you're eventually going to have to do anyways. And getting, I'll say, through that kind of mental hurdle is almost exactly where we're at again today with the AI and that kind of thing, which is, again, interesting. What I'm seeing in the CSO level, CISO level, the C-suite, is that those who are hyper learners and don't want any technical debt going into 2025 are the ones that are moving swiftly through the industry right now. So there's a lot of M&A going on behind the scenes. I think a big M&A will come back when markets come back in a year or two, as we start scooping up and a lot of this, we kind of get through this technical debt problem, if you will, but also, the fiscal debt and election year and everything else. I think once we get through that, we're going to see another M&A, let's say build up, if you will. But those that are, like I said, moving swiftly, making lots of cash, those cash cows, are those ones that are hyper learning about how to leverage these tools and teaching their teams how to do it, not replacing people. They're teaching every single person on the team how to do it, not allowing learners to say, I don't want to, or that doesn't interest me, or I can't. That's not, they're not doing that. And it's really interesting to see kind of that CISO perspective of, we don't have an option and you're on this team too, so let's go. And that's
Uh,
really the sentiment, which is interesting.
it's so
Um,
you bring up a few terms there that I want to define. Tech debt.
yeah,
So I had a question. I was doing a presentation at a company meeting, internal meeting at Hivewatch last week. And somebody asked me, I've been in a lot of roles already, in a short time at a startup. You could take a lot of hats, you move around to do what's needed. And the question was posed is that, what's been the most, like the best learning that you had? And for me, I said it was to be in product management and work with engineers, because I learned frameworks and aspects that I've applied now into sales and business development,
spot
and
on.
things like how you manage, how I manage the backlog of my work, that everything
Right.
goes in and I manage it, and I knew this concept from when I worked at the aerospace company, but it never got into security. Like I was always like, no, we don't do stuff like that. That's manufacturing, that's engineering, that's technology. We just show up and make sure bad stuff doesn't happen. Now, towards the end of my career as an end user, that mindset switched, and through the ESRM framework, I started to embrace it. But there were still these pieces missing, and tech debt is one of those newer. Like I already knew what it was, but I didn't really like understand it until I was building product and making decisions on that involved creating tech debt. So
Yep.
define what that is for our audience, and then let's talk a little bit about the applicability of security technology, tech debt, and security operations.
Well, it's two-pronged in my head. And again, being in 2024 and where we're at with AI and cyber, those are really the two biggest things. Is one is, AI is really about a bunch of learning models accepting data and then learning what to do with it. That's really its most basic form. Then the generative piece is, okay, I can go make a decision on my own based on all this data and based on these queries and so on and so forth, right? And I think at its most basic form, when we have those things, the data becomes really, really important. So an example is I work with a company right now that's going through their technical debt, believe it or not, of one of the exercises inside of governance is, let's not put shitty data inside of the learning model, the LLM. We don't want to do it. Why put crappy data in there from 10 years ago that was garbage, right? So that's step one, was go through the data. What are we going to put in there? What are we not going to do? Get rid of it. The other key component to that is cyber. Why are companies keeping more than 90 days worth of emails? Believe it or not, it's a cyber risk. Why are they keeping documents not in an archive, not stored away, encrypted at rest, any documents that are over 6 months old? Why are they doing it? And we don't even know why we do these things anymore. We've just
No.
always done it. And so we're doing it and we're
The
keeping doing
most
it.
dangerous words in the English language, Brittany, because we've always done it this way.
Right. 100%. And those people scare me. You know why? Because it's like, oh, red flag, red flag, red flag. But at the same time, That's really the two things, is that you want to protect yourself now in a data-driven world of personal information out there, of personal decisions out there, of where's your home address, right? And who's keeping your home address more than 90 days after you shut down your account? What does Airbnb do with your information? Has anybody looked up that? Has anybody looked up what Ring does with your Ring cameras? I did the other day. I went through a whole rabbit hole of what Ring does with the police departments, and they have the ability to do so from your Ring camera household, right? And I think that that's the thing, is we have to be technical debt conscious. Your photos on your phone, right? That is, I mean, between TikTok and everything else that's going on, yes, they're collecting data and it's going in the cloud to somebody else. But has anybody quickly looked at, if I delete my TikTok account because I don't want to use it anymore, how long do they keep that data? Or do they keep it forever and do they sell it? You're never going to adhere to their updated service terms and conditions because you're not technically a client anymore, but they still have your data unless they tell you they delete it, right? And I think that we have to start thinking around those circles. And companies are saying, we don't want to keep any emails the past 90 days. It's a cyber risk, get rid of it. And those lessons are finally coming into action in corporate America. Now we just need to get the middle and small size companies to adopt those. We need to set some standards and guidelines. I mean, I hate to say that, but this is simple stuff, technical debt guidelines. I mean, let's put that on the next series. We should just talk through that out and write an ebook on it, because that doesn't exist. And we need to at least help, again, small and mid-tier companies in the security space to do that.
Well, and in addition to that, the thought process of how am I making security technology project decisions based
Right,
on that same concept? So
right.
if I'm choosing, digital transformation is such a buzz term, right? And so I work with a lot of companies who are
Yep,
trying to find a path towards cloud,
yep,
and they want to do more with less, and they want to do that. And
right,
part of it is that they've built up this security technology technical debt that is so heavy they can't come from under it,
correct.
because well, I'm used to storing 90 days retention in on this server of video. It's like, all right, have you ever used it? Is that the right thing to do? How could you stream it to the cloud and for pennies on the dollar put it in an AWS instance, and
Yes,
and just hold it for, and do you need 20 hours of an empty parking lot, or can you
right.
do incident based video capture and put it there? Like, we're hoarders by
We are.
nature, right? Like, we don't want to throw things away, and I feel
Right.
like security practitioners are even worse, because we're just worried we're not going to have the thing we need when we need it. I think it's why innovation happens so slowly, because
Yep.
we don't want to move away, because we don't want to get, I think it comes down to this: we don't want to get in trouble. We
Right.
don't want to be the person who made the mistake, and status quo seems to limit mistakes. And so that's where we get into this, like, well, I don't want to move to the cloud. I don't want to move to automation. I don't want to do this because it's scary. I don't understand it. And if it goes wrong, I'm the one who made the bad decision. And I think, that I'd like to pose that question back to you, as I know you've always been kind of an advocate of innovation, trying to move folks towards it. Before it was, like you said, mobile apps, then it's cloud, then it's automation and AI. How do you get people comfortable with
Yeah.
embracing that change? It's becoming easier.
Yeah.
We're still not there. So what say you to those who are in a position where they're trying to advocate for it, and how do they move people, towards embracing change?
So it's a perfect thing. And I think you and I have run across some of the same clients too, of like it was really mobile and then cloud and now AI in processing, right? And language models. I will say that it's twofold, and I learned this in consulting world way back when, was that you sell things with two reasons: risk or cost savings. They can't say no. And I hate to say that, but it works. So an example is the average cost of a data breach in 2023 was $4.5 million. You get your data breached. On average, it's going to cost you that amount. Now, hopefully you have cyber insurance. And that was actually a tip that I gave one of my CISOs, was I said, look, I said, at minimum, we need to do a review of your insurance policy and ensure you have the proper $10 million or more cyber insurance, thing in there. And he was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about it. And I said, just that. right? If you just do like 10 of those, the key things, right? You've set yourself up for at least, getting rid of that technical debt, putting yourself in a position of limiting risk, and then again, cost savings. Because it's going to stop some of that, right, for you. And that is kind of it, is you have to educate them on what they're not thinking about. And again, that's where I start with that level, is that here's the things you're not thinking about, and here's the cost associated of not thinking about it.
Yeah,
Because we
I
are
think,
data, to your point, we are data hoarders.
yeah, yeah, and I think we don't equate the dangers of data hoarding and the delay. Like it, it I understand why, but it shocks me when I work with when I was a
Yep.
consultant or when I was even as an end user, I would and I am so I've always been the kind of technology person who's like I want there has to be a compelling reason for me to move to the next version of whatever, right? So with
Right.
my phone, it's I'm always going to do the software updates, and then if there's a compelling feature for me to move from my current iPhone to the next iPhone, I'll do it, or a couple years, because I don't want my thing to turn into a brick, right? So
Right.
I always took that same approach really with my security technology. It was harder to do because of the cost of refresh, but at least from a software perspective, like changing hardware is hard, and which is why I think, just personally speaking, that the days of a ton of hardware are going to be going away.
Correct.
And you'll have less components. The readers were always, I'll talk access control and video, kind of readers and cameras, but then anything downstream from that, in my opinion, can be put in the cloud. So we're going to get
Correct.
into a world where you're going to have edge devices and then cloud infrastructure, and that's it.
Right.
Um, till we get there, though, we have what we have today. But what folks who would be, 5, 6, 7 versions of software behind. And
Yeah.
so because they refused to keep the proper hygiene of updating their stuff, when they wanted to do any sort of innovation, it took so long to just get caught up to get the new thing to be able to add, analytics or add anything onto it. And then it's a risk too, because I mean, I remember, what was it, like Windows XP, when,
Right.
we were still running, NVRs and DVRs that had Windows XP on it. It was going out of support, and it was like, hey, from X, and there was a big mad rush to upgrade, and it cost companies probably millions of dollars because they hadn't stayed up to date on their
Right.
systems and gotten through their security tech debt, and moved towards, updated
And
and more secure platforms.
And the cost and the risk of not training your team to keep up with that 10 years of software update, right, is also
Yeah.
very expensive. So there's a company that I just recently was chatting with last week, actually, that is not okay with the cloud because they're scared of it, right? They're a mid-sized company and they are afraid to take that next step. And I said, you're on software, like you said, that's 10 years old. We're still working in Excel, so on and so forth, a lot of manual processes, those types of things. And I said, what's stopping you? Well, the risk of us putting this out there, la, la, la. And I said, yeah, but the risk of your, you want to sell soon and your valuation is highly diminished because you can't prove things in 5 minutes like other companies can. By the way, they're going to put a $300,000 or $400,000 price tag on your software update that you're going to have to do before or after that buy. I said, so you've just devalued yourself by not being up to date, just so you know that. And I don't think a lot of companies think about it like that either. If they are in that M&A, I'll say path, or they think they will be at some point, the cost of not innovating, not training your team on new tools and software is high, very high. And whether that hits you in the pocketbook when you're negotiating a price, or that hits you in the 9 months that it takes and of torture of your team getting up to speed, it's one of those, right? Or both of them at the same time. And I think a lot of companies need to realize that is like the time is now. Now it's just about the who you hire and how you go about it is sometimes the winning ticket there.
I mean, the payment's going to come due. When do you
Yes,
want to take care of it, and do you want to be
exactly.
planful about it, or you want to be forced to do it, is becomes the
Exactly.
question. Um,
Eventually your iPhone shuts off if you don't
yeah,
update it. I mean, I
yeah,
hate to
it's
say
it's
that, but
gonna
that's
stop working. Yeah, yeah,
it's going to happen, right?
right. Yeah, it's a fair point. So kind of switching gears here and kind of starting to wind towards the end. Um, so we've covered a lot of ground. We've gone to a lot of different awesome directions. Kind of taking a step back and what kind of advice or guidance would you give to the the emerging leader, the young professional, maybe specifically, you've kind of done this, you alluded to this earlier, but women who are in those roles who are trying to find a path for them, grow. What advice do you have? What guidance do you have? What would you tell them to help them,
Yeah.
do more in a shorter period of time?
Yeah, and this is I think across the board of people that I talk to, women in security, young professionals, people that are looking to kind of get in leadership positions. There's really three things that I say focus on, especially in the security industry, because again, the opportunity is very rich here. I meaning stars, rock stars stand out, and that is because we just need more of them, right? And the three things are really learn how to roadmap your job, learn how to roadmap your life, learn how to roadmap where you want to go in 10 years, learn how to network, learn how to network in locally, learn how to network internationally, and learn how to network inside your company. And then also how to listen. And same thing, learn how to listen at home, learn how to listen in your job, and learn how to listen with your team. And I think those three things are kind of the things that I abide myself to of like, if I can set up a plan, if I can have the right people surrounding me that are really, really smart, smarter than me around me, like you, Jon, that are around me and I surround myself with that network, there's no opportunity but to be going in great places. And then, of course, how to listen is you need to listen to grow. And if you're not listening, you're not growing. And like I said, I think my big thing right now is how to educate teams, leaders, and so on, especially in the security space, of how to leverage EQ and AI together. The job that sticks out the most to me in the future for AI is those who can train AI and those who are really good with people. Those are the two positions that will be left on the planet no matter what. Those who are really good with people, and notice that it's cross industry, it's not industry specific, right? Those who are really good with people that can lead people in a direction, they will always have a job. And those that can train AI to think, right? So back to your software engineers, it taught you how to backlog, it taught you how to come up with a process of thought, it taught you how to query things, right? All of that is who will always have a job, and regardless of industry right now.
So well put. I think just listened very intently, because even in that last 2 minutes, I mean, if you don't, if you just listen back the last 2.5 minutes or whatever it was that Brittany just spoke, it's probably the most impactful, some of the most impactful content that's ever been put out on this podcast. Uh, Such great wisdom, uh, such great words to live by. I think, those things, right? As you were talking, I'm reflecting on, you know, what I could do better, and one of those things I
Always.
do very well at networking broadly. I've diminished my local network as a remote employee. You're
Yep.
focusing on like being around with other places and doing other things, and like, thinking about local, company, globally, those different aspects. I love the road mapping, right? It's something I'm very passionate about. I think that's like when you start thinking about 10 years out, a vision, 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, and doing a strategic plan for your life.
Right.
Companies have strategic plans. You should think of yourself as the wholly owned company of you, and design the strategic plan for your
You got
life,
it.
and apply those same principles. So, Brittany, if someone wants to work with you, if someone's interested in learning from you, if someone wants to get in contact with you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, I think the easiest, fastest way is always LinkedIn, right? Go there, let's connect, let's work together. Like I said, my passion is innovation and strategy in this side of this industry, getting our companies to a level that's as efficient as some of these other industries and also as diverse, right? So if any of you out there are interested in, getting more women in security on your team, reach out to me, let me know. I'd love to help, because I get calls every day from people who need places to go or asking for women in security. So I love being that central hub to connect those dots. And yeah, LinkedIn I think is the best spot. But John, like I said, you are plowing through mountains with education like this for the industry, and the content that you put out, I think, is not only needed and necessary, but highly innovative. And I wish and I hope that all of anybody in the industry that's below 30 years old, these young professionals are listening to it. And I want to help you get that word out.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's exciting because I'll be announcing this when I post this podcast. I assume it'll already be announced, but I'm taking some of the content that I've put together. I'm launching online courses and putting some programs together, masterminds and other things. I was inspired by my conversations with the Rise Committee, and I'm taking that next step and following my own advice to take action and get that stuff out there so more people can consume it. So if you're listening to this and you haven't heard that yet, I'll have a link to it in the show notes as well. Please hop in and look at it. I think it's going to be highly impactful, and I appreciate those kind words, Brittany. I'll link your LinkedIn profile also in the show notes so people can get access to you that way. And as always, I appreciate it. This won't be the last time we're talking or the last time we're doing something together. Let's go do great things.
Absolutely.